Hey guys, and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk more about raids. Why? Well, because that's pretty much all I've been doing in Guild Wars 2. What was it that also came out in this update? Right, new legendary weapons. Screw those! Screw any of the fixes, screw any of the changes to the collections. It's all about the raiding, and I've got quite a few insights for you all. Raids are kind of one of those interesting topics. It's a polarizing topic. I did a video on it just a couple of days ago, and people in the comments were like, oh, whatever happened to ArenaNet not doing this kind of thing? I'm seeing more traditional MMO design come into the game, and this is bad. And the question as to why isn't often clear in people's heads. I want to talk about what the raids actually mean in Guild Wars 2, how difficult they are, what the bar is that has been set here, and kind of what you can expect, because many of us, I would guess, have come from other MMOs where raids may have been a thing, and ArenaNet have thrown us their version, and how does their version differ? So, first of all, let's talk about the actual difficulty. Let's talk about how many people are actually getting through this. Now, the video I did earlier in the week, my experience coming out of that video was I hadn't really looked much in the community at the time. But I'd gone in with my group of friends, my guildies. We'd practiced a lot on the first boss during the beta, and we kind of cleared it very fast. We cleared it with a healthy 45 seconds left on the clock after maybe an hour and a bit of practicing, getting back in the rhythm, and we moved on. And so my assumption, I even felt slightly like maybe they tuned it down a little or something. But actually, as it would seem, this first boss is really stumping a lot more groups than I was expecting or had any conception of. There are only about 17 different groups after the first 24 hours or so of the raid being out that actually downed the Veil Guardian. Only about 17 or so. And as for the second boss, well, aside from one group, nobody had killed it. After the entire first day, not a single death had happened on that first boss, and it didn't actually happen until quite late into the second day, indeed. So I kind of had this crazy moment quite early on where I realized, Jesus, we're actually competing for a world first here. And as a group, we'd been getting incredibly close to killing this damn boss, but eventually, after some ungodly amount of time, at least 12 hours straight raiding, fatigue took us, we went to bed, and it's been kind of hard to get the group back together for a big push ever since. So, difficulty, actually, I would say is pretty bang on. This is not like, the fears we had in beta where people were mistaking trash mobs for bosses and thinking you could solo stuff and all this nonsense. It genuinely is very, very, very difficult, incredibly tight, and hopefully the footage in the background should be showing you guys just what I mean by that. But what about this one group that actually managed to clear the content, you ask? Well, what about these guys? Well, this was actually D&T. There were two specific guilds that were allowed to test the raid before it came out. So these are people who have already practiced for a fair amount of time before the patch was even released to the rest of us. And D&T handily went through and blew through the raid. As for the other guild, which I am actually a part of, but I've not really communicated with very much recently, ATT, I have no idea how their progression is going whatsoever. There was actually a bit of drama with the D&T thing, which I don't really want to get into too much. But actually, I look at the fact that this one group who had been able to practice at it managed to clear the content so fast as a very, very positive thing. See, I've been stuck in this really difficult situation with the second boss. Many of us will be in this situation with the first boss, where we are slamming our heads against this almost insurmountable challenge, and it seems at times like it's impossible to improve any further. Like, how can you squeeze any more damage? How can you do any better? You've done everything perfectly, but the tiniest little moment of hesitation or failure from any of the 10 people, and it can screw you over. Like, this is a real challenge, and it can seem like it's so difficult, you'd never consistently been able to clear it. But the fact that D&T, on the first day, a group that have been able to practice it, were able to breeze through the entire wing, kill bosses that, I don't know, the third boss, as I record this video, guys, has not been killed yet, as far as I'm aware. We haven't heard of a single kill outside of D&T on that boss yet. But the fact that D&T could go through and get all of them handily is actually really empowering. It means that these things can be practiced. It means that idea of progression, of learning the encounters, is very much alive. And what's great about Guild Wars 2 compared to any other MMO, you can say what you like about Ascended Gear, but these groups that are clearing it at the moment, they will always be at that rough power level. Once you've nailed the comp and once you've nailed your strats and the way that you're playing, you're actually going to be able to consistently do this stuff for years to come, while in years to come, other people have that same practice and same progression to go through. This stays relevant forever. It's not getting outclassed and made redundant after a while, making your progression feel kind of pointless because a few months down the line another expansion pack's coming, because this is the power level. I know it's kind of an old hat thing that we all understand about Guild Wars 2, but now that raids are in the game, this classic thing we all now take for granted is truly having its opportunity to shine. But to go back to this idea of completing this consistently in the future, once you've practiced, once you've got good at it, and how D&T are a reasonable example of that, well, it's to the point, actually, that ArenaNet added a very exciting achievement to the game. This is clearing the entire wing of the raid without dying at all. That's right. Without dying, and guess who got it on one of their first times through? The D&T group that was playing. So this is how consistent you can do it. This is how good you can be. And from my situation, from my position right now, as having tried so hard, it's a really exciting thought that there is, you know, such a wide margin, such a gap that not just I, but basically the entire community are going to be able to push ourselves to and get to that level. For those who are looking for real challenge and excitement and progression, it's alive in the game. It has been brought through raids, and that's an exciting thing, and that's a great thing to have seen. Before I get into more specific discussion, I do just want to speak to the fun and the joy of the second boss fight. Now, this is something not many of you guys will have got to yet, and I have to say, I think it is a true sign of great design that after 10 to 12 hours straight even worth of attempting this boss, me and my group had exciting, funny moments that had us rolling around, laughing with one another in TS, and swearing at the top of our voices at the intensity of this battle. It's not just being difficult that has made this second boss fight in particular so fun, but the way it's designed is specifically to put you into countless scenarios where you're baiting on your last breath. So there's a big attack that the boss does, basically which you have to damage him through. You have to get him to a certain health threshold. In the middle of that attack, you'll see it's while he's expanding the whole field with this big orange AoE. And if you do not do enough damage while he's doing that, he's going to burst you all. So almost every serious attempt you get, you're in this scary last second moment where the tuning is so tight where you desperately need to push him over. With every single time you fight him, you're desperate to get as much damage as possible in, so you're waiting for the very last second before you glide off the edge, and then you're terrified if you manage to make it or not. This stuff constantly came up, and I think we'll keep this fight fun even when we're good at it, and that's something really great about the second fight that hopefully you guys will come to appreciate too when you all get here as well. So I already talked a little bit in a previous video about dedicated support. I talked about how rewarded I felt playing it, but today I did want to talk more about the idea of tanking. Now, tanking is a thing, I guess. Control is a thing. Somebody with aggro management, at least, is a thing in Guild Wars 2, and this is still way better than we've ever had in the game before. But there is some community misconceptions that I do want to clear up really early on, because when you guys hear the word tanking, it doesn't mean anything remotely like tanking in any other MMO. Tanking in Guild Wars 2 basically means this: you pick one person in your party or your raid group, and that one person builds toughness into their gear. They don't change their traits, they don't change their sigils, they don't change their runes, they change basically nothing, but they have toughness on their gear. So for example, they will change from Berserker's gear to Knight's gear, which swaps one of the stats for toughness. And by having high toughness, what this means is in raids, the boss will always follow you around and always throw his auto attacks at you. Unfortunately, because of, I guess, the dedicated support people are running, because of how little disparity there is having a high toughness or vitality character versus, you know, any old regular glass character in Guild Wars 2, because these stats don't scale particularly potently, really, you don't have to bring anything in addition to survive once you have that aggro, in nearly all cases. And so what you really just find is that one guy with a bit of toughness gear, but is otherwise DPSing like mad. So a lot of people who are clearing the content really well are people who are using, you know, like a Rabbids engineer, right? An engineer that's doing crazy condition damage, entirely spec'd for massive damage, but just happens to have toughness and can lure the boss around. Your role is actually having to lure the boss around, as being this so-called tank is actually really important and a fun part of the gameplay. You do have to move from both bosses that I've seen them to very specific places at very specific times, and you are in control of that. I've done a lot of runs now. In fact, I think the majority of my runs, I have been the tank for the second boss. And, you know, if I forget, if I'm too busy focusing on something else, you know, we basically wipe because I didn't put the boss in the right place in the right time, and that's it. It's game over. So it is a role. It is something people are doing, but don't mistake it for some kind of build. Don't mistake it for being as good as it could be. I mean, the dream scenario is that, like, Nomad's gear one day has a place in PvE on your tank, because the tank actually needs a hell of a lot more sustain to do their job, but we're nowhere near that. At least for the first two bosses. I can't speak to the third. We're nowhere near that right now. The other thing, of course, the tank can do is, and you guys should be focusing on this, especially in the second boss, but you can practice it on the first. What you should be doing is having your tank on one side of the enemy, and the rest of your group DPSing behind the enemy. So the second boss has these huge, like, cleaving attacks and a pretty nasty knockback too, which a lot of people won't learn to dodge for a long time. But if you, at least as the tank, have all of his attacks directed on you and the other 9 people are safely-ish behind the boss, you can feel a little bit more comfortable there. So the thing about the tank then that's kind of interesting is you can double up, right? Being the tank, having toughness, you can still be a DPSer, as I explained with the Rabbids engineer, but actually I was the dedicated support character on my Auramancer here, and the tank at the same time. Why? Well, because 2 of the healing power sets in the game, Cleric's gear and Apothecary's gear, both also come with toughness. So as a healer, I kind of had the choice. Did I want to be a Condi healer or a flat damage healer? And either way, it didn't matter. I had the highest toughness, and then I could also drag the boss around. So in this way, we actually had 9 people rawly doing the damage and playing into the various mechanics of that specific encounter, and just 1 person condensed into doing all the other stuff. And it takes a bit more high focus, but it's absolutely possible. Again, I'm not quite sure I like that too much. I liked the idea of having a dedicated person for each role, 1 for the control and 1 for the support, but this is kind of the situation we seem to be in, and hopefully you guys have a better understanding now. I did want to run through a couple of other things about raids as well that have been on our minds and I haven't established just yet. So first of all, DPS meters. I'm feeling the pull, guys. I'm feeling it bad. So this is a big thing on many people's minds. For those of you totally out of the loop, the idea basically here is, in Guild Wars 2, when you're playing a damage character, it's kind of hard to know where you stand compared to everyone else. Like, I just explained a situation there where you've got 9 people, and all of them are in that, like, that damaging role, okay? And they'll be buffing each other in specific, like, little comps, but you're all kind of in that damaging role. So, for your layman's perspective, the person who doesn't go to spreadsheets, the person who doesn't care that much about maths, right? Or ridiculous, you know, hypothetical scenarios and constructing them and then trying to calculate things. And I would argue that's the majority of players. If you're that guy, it's kind of hard to know, hey, am I really doing as good as I could be? Am I doing as much damage as my other Ellie friend right next to me who basically has the same build? And so when you come to raids and it's so difficult to get the amount of damage you need, these questions start to arise. For a little perspective here, again, I've just told you guys how comfortably-ish I cleared the first boss with, you know, 45 seconds left on the clock. At that, it wasn't a particularly difficult situation in terms of the damage we had. Taking that exact same set of people to the second boss, we have found it so much harder to find the damage that we need. You need an awful lot of it, and so this question is constantly on people's minds. How can we get more damage? And having more readability in games surely would be of benefit to people, no? So I can see the pull for DPS meters. I can see why people would want them. But we do also have to consider some of the downsides. ArenaNet have always kind of wanted to step back a little from kind of add-on culture with Guild Wars 2, even though it's brewed up a little. I would say in largely very positive ways. The downsides of DPS meters, particularly for me, I believe, come in the pugging scenario, where they can be used to unfairly discriminate against people and cause kind of this toxic kicking culture, right? Where, oh, you're lowest DPS, I'm going to kick you. You're lowest DPS, I can kick you. For an organized group, for a dedicated guild run like I've been doing, you know, a feature like this would be incredible for us. We'd all sit down, we'd assess it, we'd look, and we'd see the difference in the numbers. And, you know, if I found that I was doing less damage than my other Ellie friend, my Ellie friend wouldn't kick me. He'd say, all right, no, look, this is exactly what I do. Hey, let's get on Skype. I'll screen share while I play. We'll 9-man it. And look, you can watch exactly how I play, and you'll see maybe where you're messing up a bit, and then you can bring your numbers closer to mine. Because, again, Guild Wars 2 is a great game, and it doesn't actually have a gear grind treadmill, and it's not like other games where it's just, oh, he's doing more damage because he's grinded more and he has the better gear right now. It's actually something you can work on as a constructive group. So in those situations, I really do think they'd be good. But for the pugging world, I don't know so much. And so where do I stand on it? I can only speculate. I don't think Arena have made any statements. I don't know whether they're ever going to really put in the effort to do it. But with the desire now in people through raids to have more visibility on their damage, I think you're going to see a lot more of like these third-party apps that are kind of frowned on be used. And we'll have to see whether ArenaNet come out with a statement there. Next, I want to talk about masteries just a little bit. A couple of clarifications, you know, like we were going into Thorns and raids and stuff. We didn't know how things were going to be affected. How did masteries really affect the raids? How much do you need to grind in the regular jungle to be able to play the raid together? Well, not very much at all. The first boss, if you have mushroom lore, specifically so that you can eat speed boost mushrooms, you're looking good. There's actually a lot of cool little players in that first fight, which we immediately started getting good with. You know, you can stack before you go in to fight the boss behind one of the pillars, so that as you run in, you just weave and grab a speed mushroom. Don't forget, guys, speed mushrooms increase your attack speed and stuff by 10%. If you've got 10 players with that, then that's in theory a lot more damage going out. And then when you split to DPS the 3 individual monsters, once again, you can grab the mushrooms while you're there. You can grab mushrooms or keep an eye on it when, you know, the arc sometimes appears generally near them. That kind of stuff's very nice, but it wasn't like make or break. It absolutely wasn't make or break, and the mastery being required was actually a fairly low level one too at that. Same for the second boss. The mastery required was updraft. I mean, who doesn't have updraft? It is true that actually, while finding people for the raid at one point, we asked someone and they said, oh, I don't have updrafts. But to be honest, encountering a scenario like that, and if I will again in the future, I'm probably going to say no to that person anyway, just because I don't trust someone who's not even played that much of the expansion to have something so basic as updraft mastery will be very good. It's got nothing to do with the fact they can't actually use the mastery. It's just more an indicator for me that they don't actually play the game that much. So very low requirements. For the kind of transition area between boss 1 and boss 2, there's actually a fair amount of content. Most people are going to fixate on the bosses. There's actually a fair amount of content. Again, masteries played in there a bit more, and this time we're looking at adrenal mushrooms. So this is actually asking you to max out one of your masteries. So not many people in my group, for example, actually had this, could take advantage of this. But because these kind of transitionary areas are a bit easier anyway, it's okay to have adrenal mushrooms. Adrenal mushrooms are crazy overpowered, guys. They instantly refresh all of your cooldowns. So as an Ellie, you could like meteor shower, adrenal mushroom, meteor shower, like back to back with quickness on you. That kind of crazy stuff was totally possible. But in the actual boss areas, we've not seen that. One thing that I do kind of like the idea of is before the second boss, there are some adrenal mushrooms sort of nearby. So if you go in and you have kind of a terrible run and you wipe very early on, you might find that your Mesmer, for example, has got a huge cooldown to wait out on his time warp. Great. Well, if that Mesmer has max masteries, it can help you out a little bit because he can go back into that previous room, grab an adrenal mushroom, and it allows you to keep the pace up, go another attempt, another attempt, another attempt. How useful that really is, I don't know, though. Sometimes this waiting on cooldown is a nice thing. It means you consider something you hadn't before. People check their food and refresh that, and so on. So that's kind of the way that mastery is being used. Very minimally, low requested requirements, but in some ways with the adrenal mushrooms, there is a bit of a perk. And that's pretty much all there is to say. We've, of course, got the new mastery, but that's really just to do with the vendor and the new rewards. So I do want to talk about these also. Here's the funny thing that I really like about raids right now, because it's new, because people aren't really clearing it, and because we're all so generally, the people who are playing it are having so much fun with them, that nobody's really talking about the rewards at all. That will happen in time, absolutely. I think after people have cleared it just once or twice, that's immediately when they're going to think, all right, I want to be rewarded for continuing to do this. And, you know, people would be right to think that. So how are the rewards? It looks like you're capped weekly at 105 magnetite shards, which I got like on our first evening. The mastery within the raid actually allows you to access a vendor who can just let you straight up buy ascended gear. So for now, during the progression period of time, everybody's actually losing a lot of money. You know, I'm spending gold after gold after gold on the absolute best food that I can for every individual attempt. For what it's worth, there's even a ridiculous new scribing food in the game that's like that is 200 power while you're above 90% health. Isn't actually a food. It's like a sharpening stone, so it's ridiculously powerful. But if you die, you lose it, as far as I'm aware. Not many people in the game can even craft it at the moment because scribing is so expensive. So it's like this ridiculously expensive thing you can do for like that one golden attempt you desperately want to try, maybe. But so food is actually costing people a lot of money, and there's no loot, there's no trash, there's no flooding of inventory. That's actually kind of a good thing because you end up spending so many hours in here, and it's not easy to get access to merchants and stuff. But you lose money. But it does seem like, if we can get to that level that D&T has well demonstrated to us that it's possible to get to, this is a great way every week of genuinely getting good amounts of ascended gear that help you play more of the roles that you're seeing your other friends in the raids and stuff do. For now, there is that sting of the money. For example, today, we kind of have an interesting idea for the boss that we want to try next time we do it, where you play with a lot of Condi builds, you epidemic the boss in the middle to some of the mobs around him, and then you epidemic those mobs, which will kill the mobs, which is absolutely really useful, but then you epidemic back onto the boss. Kind of a weird technical play that we want to look at. But this got me looking into Condi Reaper, and Condi Reaper meant I was getting a full set of Viper's Ascended Armor today, and for the first time in a while, I'm getting that healthy dose of reality, I think, with just how expensive Damask is at the moment. And I think that is constricting some raid groups. What I would say, though, guys, is don't be fixated on Ascended Armor. Ascended trinkets are just fine. You can go back to the previous video I looked at, and you will see, not only did we clear that first boss fairly handily, because we understood the mechanics, but one of the guys in my party was in exotic gear, and he was running, like, crazy weird tank stat sets that you absolutely 1000% do not need. So don't get too hung up on it. Do expect that progression, you lose a bit of money, but I think in the end, you'll be very, very rewarded, both in terms of how fun it is and good you feel from just getting that good of clearing the content, but also actually in-game rewards. You get some of these new unique lucky drops and so on. The final little thing that I want to talk about is pug ability. For those of you not as heavily tuned into the community as I am, you wouldn't know this, but a bit of reassurance. Maybe I should have said this at the start of the video, but if you're still at the end and you're interested, but you haven't been playing too many raids, actually, numerous pug groups are now getting through. While there weren't many Veil Guardian kills in the very, very early days, they are slowly creeping in, and there are a lot of posts and a lot of messages that I'm getting, specifically from people saying, hey, I managed to do it in a pug. I managed to do it. Here's the build I was running. And everybody is generally being very cooperative and very friendly with sharing their strategies and their tactics. And it's been a pretty cool experience. So don't be too scared of it. It is a unique experience, and it is one that would cost you a lot of time, but you may end up finding you have a lot of fun. Anyway, thanks for listening to my thoughts on that, guys. I hope you enjoyed them. I'd love to hear more of yours. Again, the comment sections are great for me. It gives me that, realistic look from maybe some of your different perspectives. And I'll try and incorporate more of those into future videos. But thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope I helped if I could. And I'll see you next time.